Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and spending an hour with me. I know it's a very busy day and you have a lot to do, so I so appreciate you being here. Today, we're going to be talking about defining your signature photography style, creative storytelling through multi-genre photography. And that's really become my specialty, is blending different genres into my own unique signature style. So today, we're going to be going over how I did it and how you guys can do it in your own work too. So a little bit about me to start, even though I got a great intro. You can find me on all social channels at Hey Kelsey J. I am a Seattle-based commercial photographer and model. My specialties are really travel, fashion, and commercial work. I really combine all of those into my work, which is what we'll be going over. By gaining a large social media following, that was really my entry into the industry to work with commercial brands like Canon, Adobe, Hyundai. I'm now signed as a Canon creator who's sponsoring today's class. Happy to be with them. And throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to get published in some pretty cool magazines. So I want to start here. I really want to level set with mindset as we get started, because nothing we're going to talk about is really going to resonate unless you really truly believe this about yourself. I'm here to tell you guys that each and every one of you, you are an artist. I think a lot of times in the photography world, especially with social media and content creation, we feel like we're just creating for an algorithm, or maybe we don't feel like an artist, we're just a photographer, we're just an Instagrammer, we're just an influencer. But really, every single one of us is here to create art in our own unique way, and I want you guys to feel like you have the agency to do that when you leave this room today. So what we're gonna be thinking about, and the question I want you to ruminate on, is what are you creating that will become your artistic legacy? I know that's a very deep question, but it's what I really think about in terms of the art I create for me and that I want to put out into the world. So I'm going to do a bit of a deeper dive than normal on my photography journey, and why I'm doing this is because you're going to be able to see the different experiences I had in my life with art and photography and how I was able to meld them together into one unique style that I'm shooting today. I will say, if you admire the work of anyone you see here at Bild and that you hear talk, I would go ahead and do some research onto where they came from, because everyone you see has already gone across this path that you want to follow too, right? And if you see how other people did it, you can kind of figure out how you can do that too. And also, maybe you can think about your own experiences and how things you've been interested in your past, you can then integrate into your work today as well. So I started off taking photos when I was 10 years old. I begged my parents to buy me a point-and-shoot camera at Costco. So I've been taking photos ever since. I was also lucky enough to go to a high school where we had digital and film photography classes at a public high school. So we started learning from there. But at the same time, I got signed to a modeling agency in San Francisco when I was 17, which is where I got so much experience as a model and in front of a camera, but also working with professional fashion photographers and starting to understand like what it was like on set, what people were doing to be creative, how did styling work, how do we direct models. I learned so much from being on the other side of the lens as well. Eventually, let's move on. Eventually, after college, I moved to San Francisco and got a job in PR, and I realized pretty quickly that photography was really where my heart lies, and I wanted to figure out how to do it full time. But to be honest, at the time, I couldn't even get hired as an unpaid intern at a studio. It was so competitive. So I started going to photography meetups and finding people that were doing this full time by posting photos onto this app called Instagram. This is very early days. And I realized that that was a path to be able to get hired and find the clients you want as well. This is also when I got really inspired by the outdoors. I was going on adventures locally around San Francisco to Yosemite on the weekends, Big Sur, the North Coast. And eventually I gained a small following and I gained my courage up and I quit my full-time job. I sold all my things, I let go of my apartment, and I started traveling the world full-time outside of a carry-on suitcase. And that is over here when I got really into landscape photography as I traveled. And then finally, COVID hit. I had to slow down from my insane travel schedule. At this point, I had gained the clients, I had gained the following, I had gotten to where I wanted to go, right? And I finally was able to slow down and think about, was I happy with my work? Did it feel like it was uniquely me? Did it feel authentic? Did it feel different than other people's work? And for me, I realized that I wanted to also incorporate a bit of editorial and fashion and modeling back into my work. So I started incorporating style and self-portraiture into my travel shoots, which I think really set me apart and was a lot more of a unique way to go about my work. So how I got here and how you can kind of figure out your own style is where we're gonna go with this talk. Okay, the number one goal of a photographer is to determine your defined creative style that is so unique and identifiable that anyone who sees an image will immediately recognize it as your work. This is very difficult to do. I'm gonna level set with you. This has taken me years, the entirety of my career, to find this, but I will say it's so important because if you look at any photographer that's speaking here today and tomorrow, you're gonna see that they have figured this out, because having that unique thread that ties all of your work together and you have that signature, that's what clients wanna hire you for, right? Because you have this unique thing and you know how to tell stories in a unique way that other people may necessarily not do. So it's finding your own voice and that unique creative spark that is uniquely yours, that is what you're gonna get hired for. It's also the same thing as if you're scrolling through Instagram and you didn't see the name of the photographer, you would immediately know whose work it is. It's getting that identifiable spark that is uniquely your work. I kind of cheated by being in my work. I feel like that was a pretty easy way to do it. But you can also do this through editing, through composition, through your subjects, through your storytelling. Falling into the niche trap. I feel like this is a bit of a hot take and some people may not agree with me, but I do think that hyper-niching into one very specific photography style can limit your opportunities and your creative potential for the future. And this was a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. I got so deep into travel photography and landscape and I loved it so much. And that was everything I was known for and it was everything my clients hired me for. And then when I realized that I wanted to expand creatively to incorporate fashion and commercial and all these other things, that it didn't fit into that niche and that brand I had created for myself. So I had to completely rebrand, did an overhaul of my social media, my website, had to have a lot of conversations with clients, and I was able to expand creatively. But if you think about this ahead of time and think about everything that you might want to do in the future creatively for yourself, and you have a bit of a wider net in terms of the niche that you're in, it's going to give you more wiggle room in the future to have the lifestyle that you want and to shoot the work that you want and not get stuck shooting the same thing over and over again. Okay, so how do we break this down in a way that we can actually use moving forward, right? In my world, I really think there's only two kinds of photography. I think there's capturing a moment, which would be, just capturing something in a unique way that's happening around you that you don't have a lot of control over, right? So that could be landscape, that could be sports, because it's just happening in front of you, that's street. That's one category. And then I think there's creating a moment, which could be, especially studio work, because you're in control of everything, you're in control of the lighting. Editorial work in terms of the fashion and the style, like that's really pushing that work forward and you're creating everything also outside of the camera as well as in camera, even portraiture, because you're really showing people how you want them to look on camera so they look good. So I've kind of combined these two worlds into my work, but we're gonna talk about how to be uniquely creative and find your own unique style within each category, no matter what you wanna go shoot moving forward. Okay, so how to be creative when capturing a moment. I'm gonna kind of focus on landscape and travel work, because that is kind of my signature style that we're going into. Things that I think about when I wanna go do a landscape or a travel shoot to set my work apart. Number one, difficult to access location. I know if I go somewhere that's very hard to get and not a lot of photographers have been there before already, that's gonna set my work apart. It's kind of doing the work for me, right? So for example, this is an image from Song Dong Cave in Vietnam that I took this past March. Less people have been inside this cave than on top of Mount Everest, so it's very difficult to get in there. It took many years for me to be able to get the permits to go inside, and that already did half the work for me, right? Like this is already a rare image because not a lot of people have been able to take it. Unique composition, of course, the way you compose your work, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, can set your work apart as well. A lot of people walk up to a pretty view, they stand there, they take one photo like that, and they're done. But we're gonna do more work than that. Rare weather conditions, I am pretty obsessive about getting rare weather conditions in my work. So I go to places multiple times, I go specific times of year, we're gonna drill down into that. Editing style, of course, can set your work apart. It takes a lot of time experimenting to find your editing style. I find people usually start out by emulating the editing style of photographers they like, but once you kind of understand the tools and you've done that, it's nice to push it a little further and find an editing style that's gonna translate throughout your photos, no matter what niche you're taking photos of, no matter where you're shooting. Having a consistent editing style can really help bring your work together in a more cohesive portfolio. And also the ability to work quickly, which I think people don't talk about a lot. But this is why it's really important to understand your gear, because when you're out in the field and you only have a split second to take a photo, you need to be able to get your camera settings correctly really quickly so that you also have time and the mental bandwidth to also think about shooting something creatively, right? And how you can do something differently. So for example, in this image, we had about 2 minutes of light rays each time they would come through between clouds. So I had to be ready to go to get photos and videos every single time we got a little glimpse. And that really comes from a lot of practice and really understanding the gear you're using to be able to use it automatically. Okay, here are some examples of what we were just talking about. The one on your guys' left here, right? Yeah, the left. That is a spot in the mountains in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. I had done this backpacking trip, I think 3 times, once every year, and I didn't post or shoot a single photo until I got these conditions. I had been obsessively checking the weather to see when clouds would be there and when the temperature might rise to get the clouds to drop at sunset. And because the clouds are there, it makes this photo look completely different than any images I've seen of this spot. And I think it also gives it that kind of like magical element that I'm always trying to incorporate into my work, where it feels almost unreal. So that's just one way to think about weather conditions to get really rare, unique work. Similar to the photo in the middle, I will say that sunset is not entirely real. This was from a digital art project, but the sun coming through the Arches National Park, a place that has been shot by probably millions of photographers, right? The sun only comes through the arch at that angle, a very specific time of year. So I specifically wanted to go, I believe this was early December, so that I could get the sun directly through the arch and also kind of lighting where I could stand on that rock. Like that's a very specific way to think about your weather and your lighting and your conditions to get a very specific composition, right? That other people maybe wouldn't think of. And then the photo on the right, that is Firefall in Yosemite. It's an incredible time in February where the sun is angled perfectly to illuminate this waterfall, and it makes it look like it's on fire. But I had gone every single year and multiple times every single year until I got a shot that I felt like was different than everyone else's, right? So luckily on this particular day, there had been fresh snowfall and there was wind, and the snow blew off the cliff, and it made all of the snow also look like it was on fire. So I was able to get a shot that I felt like was different and more epic than other images I had seen of that location. So really what this comes down to is just a lot of persistence, a lot of obsession about the weather, and just like having that high standard for your work that you're gonna keep going back until you get the image that you're really proud of. Okay, well let's switch to how to be creative when you're creating a moment. So for me, that's usually portraiture, conceptual, fashion, right? This is where a lot of your creativity is gonna actually happen before the shoot even starts. You really need to sit down and take time to come up with creative concepts. I think a lot of times as photographers, we're so busy, we're always running around and we're just thinking about the next shoot, to the next call, to the next editing session, but you really need to build out time in your schedule for creative concepting and trying to find new creative inspiration and come up with new ideas. I spend a lot of time doing this. I make multiple mood boards for my year, so I always have a ton of ideas that I know I want to execute on. And then storytelling is so important. Thinking ahead of time of the story you want to tell. We're going to deep dive into that in a second. Wardrobe and hair and makeup, so important. The details are so important in these shoots to pull them off and make them look, really, really high level. Props as well, location scouting, and of course, lighting, right? So we're going to dive into these. Okay, let's talk about storytelling. I think storytelling is really important when we're talking about this context of coming up with this unique style that kind of transcends genres, because storytelling is something that if you get really good at it or you're used to telling stories in a certain way, it doesn't matter what niche or type of photography you're shooting, your storytelling can also be that creative theme and that thread that ties it all together, right? So the best photography not only tells a story, but it makes the viewer feel an emotion. I am always thinking about what do I want the viewer to feel when they see this work. I use this example here. This was from a campaign I was commissioned for by Hyundai last year to go photograph the total solar eclipse, which was amazing. And I knew going onto this assignment that the main idea was this hero image, right? These images of the car with the total solar eclipse. But I didn't feel like that told enough of a story that was really gonna pull at people's heartstrings, that would really resonate with people. I think we all saw a million incredible photos of the eclipse online when it happened, so I wanted to do something a little deeper. And so you see, I also photograph the journey and the process of getting those photos, including, driving there, getting my gear out of the car, those things that highlight the client and the product, but also are genuinely telling parts of the story, the process of photographing this. But then I wanted to take it even further, and I'm someone that tells a lot of personal stories in my work. It's something I'm pretty comfortable doing online. And so for me, I specifically picked a location to shoot this that was near where my dad lived, and I really wanted to bring him along on a shoot with me to experience not only my job, but experience this once-in-a-lifetime moment together. And I thought that was that emotional storytelling thread that was really gonna resonate with people. And it was also just really beautiful and fun to shoot for me and have that experience with him. So that's what I'm talking about with storytelling, is it's something that's gonna really pull people in and be a universal feeling that a lot of people can relate to. Okay, so breaking that down again, good storytelling is vulnerable, universally relatable, and emotional. Again, it's not just telling a story that you want to tell, it's telling a story that is going to be universally relatable to other people. And ahead of the photo shoot, think about this story, because then once you already know your story ahead of time, that's how you'll decide how you will tell that story visually. I will say for that eclipse shoot that day, obviously the timing was so incredibly important. So already knowing the story I was gonna tell, I already had timers set on my phone and a shot list, so I knew the exact window that I had to take those photos with my dad. I knew the exact photo to get those photos of setting up the gear, and then of course, the timing for shooting the eclipse. So it's getting to that detail to make sure that you're getting all those photos to tell your story. It takes a lot of upfront understanding and planning. And again, visual storytelling is emotion, environment, and detail. It's getting all of these throughout your work in multiple images. Concepting, similar, but usually when I think of a concept, it's a visual creative idea that I want to bring to life on my own, right? So again, it's through the concept, thinking about the story you're trying to tell, and mostly how you will achieve that story visually. But the number one thing I want you guys to think about on this slide is how will I photograph this in a way that is different than anyone who has ever photographed this before? That is a hard question to answer, I know. There's a lot of us here. We've got a lot of photographers in this room, but I promise you, if you really think about it, there's gonna be a way that is unique to you to photograph anything. It's a difficult question to answer, but if you can answer this question, that is how you're gonna get to your unique creative identity as a photographer, right? And then again, we chatted about this, how will this story connect with the viewer? Again, it's about how they will feel about your story, not how you feel about your story. We gotta think about the audience first. And then how does this translate when you're actually on the shoot? Of course, composition. At every photo shoot, remember to get a wide establishing shot, a hero shot, the reaction, emotional, candid shot, and even detail shots to kind of help further tell your story, right? I do notice when photographers are early on in their career, I was definitely guilty of this. People usually show up to a shoot and they have one lens and they stand there and they take their photo and they just shoot a ton of photos from the exact same perspective and they call it a day. They think they got the shot. But a really good photographer is used to switching out lenses, using different focal lengths. They're getting low, they're getting high, they're walking around, they're getting different angles to make sure that they're getting as much variety that they can from one photo shoot in order to tell the story. I'm gonna use this example because I was outside Cape Town, South Africa, and I was able to rent this really cool Cobra car. I wish I could have kept it. And that day, the weather was really bad, and we ended up only having, me and my photo assistant, about a 20-minute window to shoot between wind gusts and rain. So we were only able to park this car at this spot. I didn't get a variety in locations like I had hoped, right? So I knew I needed to get as creative as possible with what I had at that time. So from one spot, you can see I got above the car, below the car, we got a lot of compression, we got further away, we got our hero images, we got context, we also got portraiture. Also, I think the wardrobe really helps tell the story here. So this is just an example of like how much variety you can get in one shoot, even in 20 minutes, when you get really comfortable with moving around and getting these different compositions. Again, I feel like wardrobe styling, hair and makeup and props, the devil is really in the details. For most of my career, I've never worked with a stylist. I style everything myself, and I think we're all really busy people. And sometimes these details can go out the window, or we don't think about them until right before the shoot. But thinking about these things is what can really pull an image together, both for portraiture, but also, and of course, fashion. For example, in this image, I knew I was shooting the salt flats and it was very white, and I knew I needed to wear something that was gonna pop from the background, right? So when I'm combining portraiture and editorial with landscape, I constantly need to think about how my styling is going to interact with the environment around me, and also the details, including, you know, lipstick that match the color, the glasses, the jewelry, all of that. Like, that really pulls together an image so it feels more high level than work that doesn't necessarily think about the details as much. So here's an example of styling and how styling can really pull a concept together. My original concept for this shoot was 4th of July trust fund in the Hamptons. I wanted this to feel rich, you know, we can only dream. But only I had a small rental boat in Lake Union in Seattle. It was also really cold that day, so I was freezing out there, but we make it work. And what really elevated this shoot to drive that concept home was the styling, right? And I really wanted it to feel high level, and I really wanted to make sure it just didn't look like a girl in a bathing suit on a boat, because that wasn't gonna tell my story. It wasn't gonna feel editorial. So it really came down to the styling and the accessories. You know, I had the same swimsuit on in a few shots, but it's the captain's hat. It's the striped shirt over it, you know, mixing patterns. It is the robe, and then also having this high level pantsuit on a boat, and a gown on a boat, and also the sunglasses, the jewelry, even wearing heels on a boat. Like, that's what's really telling my story here, right? And so this is how styling and thinking about it can really up-level your shoot. Even if you're shooting senior portraits or portrait clients, if you're helping them do this, they're gonna love the work afterwards, right? So taking the time to do this can really elevate your work. Okay, let's talk about working with natural light, because since I mostly travel, I would say 90% or more than that of all of my work is shot in natural light. So there's a lot of different ways you can work with natural light, and of course, when you're shooting on location, golden hour is the best, sunrise, sunset, but there's other things you can think about to get those rare weather conditions right. For one, I am personally obsessed, absolutely obsessed with light rays. And all of this takes understanding how light works, when light will move, when the sun will move that time of year in a location. It's drilling down to that very specific level. You also need a level of haze in the air to get them this detailed. So for example, that one on the top left, that is from a cave in Bend, Oregon. There's only 2 weeks out of the year in July where the sun lines up to get light in that cave. But then from there, I wanted to be able to see the details in these rays even more, which is why I brought a can of that wedding aerosol spray, which is cave safe, I checked, don't worry. But I sprayed that into the light so that you're able to see, you can see it here, more of the details in the light rays. So it's thinking about those things ahead of time is how you can elevate the work once you are on location, when you finally get that time of year where you can get the shot right. Another example is, down here, this was the Oregon coast. I happened to figure out that there was only 1 week in early January where those light rays come through, and if you get a little fog, you get that amount of depth and dimension in your image, which is really cool. And in the bottom, that was an image from deep in China. And this was not one I could go back to all the time. It was very difficult to get to where I was in China. And so I got one day at this castle, and I was walking around, and the light I noticed was kind of too harsh to start shooting yet. And then I noticed all of a sudden the sun was behind the mountain, and I had messed up, and already things were getting into shadow. And so what I did was I ran across that bridge, I got to a spot where you were allowed to drone, and I sent the drone up because I realized from a higher perspective that maybe I could still get some more light in my image, right? And luckily I was right, and I was able to get these light beams from the mountain that actually even, you know, help center the castle in the middle of the image. So understanding where light is moving and how you can work with it is a great way to work with natural light when you're traveling. I also absolutely love shooting at blue hour. I think a lot of photographers put the camera gear away and go home once it starts getting dark, but this 15 to 20 minutes is my favorite time to take photos, mostly because it is so cinematic. But when you shoot and it's that dark out and you're shooting a subject, you need to think about how you're gonna light their face properly, right? And I personally usually get pretty scrappy with it. I don't necessarily always bring tons of lighting equipment with me. So in these images, the one in the middle, don't try this at home, but I did light a bouquet of roses on fire for this Valentine's shoot concept. I think it turned out pretty cool. Could have singed my eyebrows, so be careful out there. Again, I did a similar thing with the birthday cake. I think what makes this image creative is me having the candle in my mouth. I think that makes it look a little more conceptual or a little weird, right? But again, the candles, the flames on the candles is what's illuminating my face in that image. Parking garage, I was already there shooting, and I thought it would be interesting to sit underneath the light to get this very dramatic, mysterious look. And the ones on the right were both shot with a little Lume Cube, little RGB light. Once I put on this astronaut suit in public, which looked really silly, by the way, I realized that you couldn't see my face at all because it was dark in that mask, right? So what I did was I took that little light and I just shoved it into the helmet with me so that it would actually illuminate the side of my face. Same with this ice cave in Alaska this last winter. Our tour guide had found this block of ice and I thought it was really cool, but you couldn't really see it well on camera. It wasn't really translating. So I took that same little light and I put it underneath my glove and I held the ice and I held it in a way so that that light not only illuminated the ice block itself to look like that, but it also illuminated my face when I was looking down at it. So again, it's these little details and finding really scrappy ways to get creative with your lighting that other people won't think about. That's what's gonna set your work apart, right? All right, let's talk about gear, because I get asked all the time what I shoot with. And yes, I'm a Canon creator, I'm Team Canon all the way. I personally love Canon gear, very specifically because I love the Canon color profile and I think it's absolutely beautiful for portraits, how the skin tones turn out. So I've shot Canon my entire career. And again, don't feel like you need as much gear as I am lucky enough to have access to now to make really creative work. For the first 2 years of my career, I remember I cashed out half of my bank account to get one DSLR, I think it was the 5D Mark IV, and one lens, which was the 24-70 2.8. And all of the work that really skyrocketed my career in the beginning was shot just on that one camera and one lens. So I don't want you to feel limited to create limited to create good work just based on the gear you have, right? But let's talk about these because I know you guys probably want recommendations. My primary camera now is the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. This is a full frame digital mirrorless camera. I personally love this camera because it does everything I need to do. It can shoot video in 8K. The photos turn out incredible. It has really great autofocus tracking. So this is my primary professional camera body, right? Especially for shooting commercial work for clients. But the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, this was my primary camera body for a couple years because it's very similar to the R5 series. It has a great sensor. It also shoots photo and video, and it's at a bit of a lower price point. So I usually recommend this camera to a lot of people as well. If this is like more in budget for you, I think it's a great option. I now use it as a secondary camera body, whether I have one camera set to video, one to photo, or I have lenses on each so I don't have to switch lenses, but it's also a great option. I also wanted to mention that Canon just released the Canon EOS R50V. This is a brand new tiny little vlogging camera. And I know we're all photographers, but I think we also know by now that on social media, you also kind of have to shoot behind the scenes video to be able to get more eyes on our work online, right? And so this is a fun little option, especially if you're not super comfortable shooting video yet. I've been using it to vlog behind the scenes and also for YouTube vlogs because it's so lightweight. It's really easy to throw into your backpack with you. And I also love mentioning the Canon PowerShot G7X Mark III. This is just a tiny little point and shoot camera, but I bring it around not only because it has a fun flash and it's fun to shoot with, but also sometimes you'll be going to locations and they're not gonna let you bring in all of your camera gear. This almost happened to me 2 weeks ago in Egypt. There was obviously high security when I went into the pyramids and they almost took away half my gear. Luckily, I was able to get it in, but in general, I like to have a backup point and shoot camera just in case that's all they'll allow me to bring. Another example of that is I was able to do a little campaign for Canon at Coachella a couple years ago, but it was too last minute to get a press pass. So I shot everything on this little point and shoot. So again, the best camera is the one you have with you, so it's nice to have some backup options. In terms of lenses, for my work, since I'm traveling and I need my lenses to kind of pick up a lot of the weight, they need to do double duty, I really over-index on zoom lenses. Canon just released the 16 to 28 millimeter f2.8. I like this lens primarily because it is so lightweight. It is so easy to take with you. I couldn't believe how small and lightweight it was when I got my hands on it. So I've been loving that lens for wide angle. 24 to 70 2.8, I've already talked about it. It's my favorite lens. If you guys only can get one lens, get that one. I also added the 28 to 70 f2 to my kit. The f2 versus the f2.8, personally, I can see a huge difference in that, and I think the bokeh for portraiture and the compression is so beautiful. So it is a heavy lens, it's really high quality glass, but I have loved using that lens as well. And then for zoom lenses, I've switched over to the 100 to 500 millimeter. I love my 70 to 200, and it's nice to have a 2.8 on that lens, but I've noticed for a lot of things that I wanna shoot, a large level of compression is really important in terms of, you know, making landscapes look big or getting layers or even wildlife photography. So I've been loving this lens to get all the way up to a 500 millimeter. I think it's really elevated the creativity in my work because I just have a wider range that I can shoot with, right? Prime lenses are also amazing. I try to shoot with them as much as I can, but I really only usually bring about one per trip because I have to be careful with the amount of gear I can carry. But Canon just released a new RF 20mm f1.4. It's pretty wide, but I like that in terms of kind of the environmental portraiture I do, because you can get your subject not too distorted, but you're also getting a lot of the scene behind them. I've used it to photograph inside canoes, where you have to be pretty close to your subject, but you're still getting enough of the environment around them. The RF 35mm f1.8 is probably my favorite prime lens though, just because the 35mm is just such a great focal length. The RF 50mm, this is a new one, the f1.4. This is brand new. It's more lightweight than the 51.2. It's also optimized for video. I love this lens primarily for commercial and product shots. I find that products look so clean on this lens. I love using it for that. And also the RF 85mm f1.2. I personally don't use this lens a lot because I'm a little more landscape minded. I shoot a little wider, but I put it on here because most portrait photographers I think would say that this is their primary lens they like to shoot portraits on. So it's also a great lens if you're focused more on more traditional portraiture, right? Okay, key takeaways from everything we've talked about so far. Approach each photo shoot asking yourself how you can create something different than you've ever seen before. That is the number one thing we're talking about here, right? How do you make something that is uniquely you different than other people? And I also wanted to throw in here, find your unique signature style through play. This should be a fun process, right? I think we create our best work when we are having fun at a shoot and we feel comfortable and safe to experiment and get weird with it. So this should be a fun process. Even though it takes a lot of time to figure out your style, it should be a fun journey. Okay, just gonna go over some photo examples real quick here. This was taken at a tulip field in the Pacific Northwest, a very popular photography location. These photos I think are really beautiful. You know, you get the compression, you get to see the rows of the tulips, they're really nice, right? But I wanted to do something completely different than I had ever seen before here, which is why I wanted to go for a super wide angle, low perspective, which gave this a completely different look of a photo shoot, right? And I've never seen anyone shoot like this. So this was, again, just thinking about using a very wide angle lens. I think this was shot around 12 to 15 millimeters. You know, I kind of liked the distortion in these images, actually, right? I like images that aren't perfect, to give it a completely different look than anything I've ever seen. Something I think about a lot, especially with styling, is contrasting your environment or matching it. You know, for example, this image in Joshua Tree, I picked this outfit and this pose out there because I just decided I wanted to be a Joshua Tree physically, and I wanted to stand there and just match my environment, which I think makes the image more aesthetically pleasing when everything matches and is color coordinated. But the other image, this was at Ocean Beach in San Diego. This is a bit more of a conceptual take where I thought that it would make people stop and look if you do something that doesn't make sense in the environment, right? So I got this chair, I think at Goodwill for $15 nearby, and a newspaper and kind of a bit of an office outfit, and I was able to sit out there. And what makes it interesting is it kind of makes people stop and stare. It's a bit uncomfortable because you would never see someone do that, right? So there's ways to match your environment and ways to completely contrast your environment in ways that don't make sense. That's kind of a segue into conceptual photography. Conceptual is really just about creating art, right? It's not about the clothes. It's not even really about the person. It's not about the place. And I personally think about conceptual photography and that it makes people feel, again, almost uncomfortable, where they're not sure what to do with the image. And I think what's really contrasting in these images is you have me, the subject, that's looking very calm and serene, but then you have these snakes that are probably pretty scary to a lot of people, especially wrapped around you. I was freaking out a little bit, but we made it through it. So that's another way to think about conceptual photography is how do you have these contrasting themes inside your imagery? Okay, we're almost done here, guys, but I wanted to quickly talk about personal branding because I think, again, a lot of photographers, I think, don't think about this enough. We're so heads down creating the work, but really your personal brand is how you're gonna communicate your work to the world as well as to your clients and on social media, right? And when you don't really prescribe to a very specific niche that does that work for you, it's even more important to think about your personal brand and how you're gonna communicate that when you wanna shoot multiple genres. So this is really important, I think, for social media specifically, because I think your social media audience wants to see who you are. They come in for the beautiful photos, right? But then eventually, to stay engaged with you, They want to get to know the person behind the camera. They want to know your personality. They want to see the behind the scenes. They want to know your goals and your hopes and your dreams. That is how an audience is really going to stick with you and engage with your content more, right? So you don't have to show yourself as much as I do. You do not have to be in every photo, I promise. But just finding little ways to incorporate yourself into your personal brand is going to take you pretty far online. Okay, so I think this is something that people get wrong. Personal branding is not defining the one thing that you are. You do not just have to be a travel photographer, a wedding photographer. Personal branding is defining all that you are, which is a bit more complicated to do, but if you can define everything that you want to create into one personal brand, that is going to give you a lot more creative agency over time and kind of future-proof your career in other areas that you want to shoot. So what anchors your personal brand outside of a genre, right? I think it's your purpose, it's your why. It's why you want to be creating this work. It's sharing with the world like what your why is. I think for me personally, that's showing people that they can do a creative career path and it is absolutely possible to be successful at. I think that's my why. That's why I'm talking to you guys today. It can also be your voice and your tone of voice. I made a very distinct choice to start speaking to my audience online like I speak to my friends, very casually, because I wanted my audience to feel like they knew me as a person and I wasn't coming off too professionally polished. Your storytelling themes. Again, I choose really personal stories, but for you, that could be telling the stories of people that maybe need a platform that don't have it yet. There's so many ways you can tell stories in this world, right? And again, your creative style, which we just went into in depth. I just wanted to say that I really think authenticity is everything. I think by now, you guys know when we see a caption written by ChatGPT, we immediately know that, right? It's very easy for us to tell when things are inauthentic, and I think we inherently kind of want to move away from those things. So showing up authentically as yourself in your work and also the way you present your work and your brand is so important because that's unique to you, right? No one else can copy that. And that really means embracing who you are and being comfortable sharing that within your work. Easier said than done, I know, but when you get comfortable sharing more of yourself within your work, I really think people relate to it on a different level. So, an exercise for you guys to take home. How would you describe your personal brand and your company mission in one sentence? This is easier said than done. I feel like I still need to work on this a little more. I would say right now I'm a travel and commercial photographer specializing in self-portrait work, here for commercial brands and to tell stories that people resonate with. But there's so many ways you can go with that, right? But this is important because once you start, gaining some clients, you're gonna get on a new client call and they're gonna be like, so tell me about yourself, what do you do? And you really need to know how to articulate that in a really easy way, right? So this is very important to do. You can also create a brand guidelines document. For me, I actually made an entire template that I go through every year in terms of my content pillars, the way I speak, what fits into my brand, what doesn't. I posted that on my YouTube channel at Hey Kelsey J. If you guys want to do a deep dive branding exercise, it's there for you guys. And then eventually you also want to create a logo and a website that kind of communicates this brand for you. This is a logo I have now. I'm to a point where I was able to work with an illustrator for it. I think it's, it's fun, it's colorful, it's approachable. I wanted it to feel like an artist, not like a law firm, right? But if you're not there yet, you can also, of course, make one in Canva or whatever you have access to. Last slide, I also just wanted to drop a couple screenshots of my portfolio, just because I think we see a lot of traditional photography portfolios, you see a lot of Squarespace templates, and I just want you to know that if you are a multi-hyphenated creator like me, I do video production, I'm on camera, I do commercial shoots, I do social media, I had to come up with a completely different website template with a web designer to try to communicate all the different kinds of work that I do. So I just wanted to put this here as an example that you can go check out of just like a different way to do a portfolio. Don't feel like your portfolio needs to look like everyone else's, right? All your portfolio is supposed to do is communicate everything that you do and the way that you do it. Okay, key takeaways from everything. Take time to define your personal brand in a unique way that won't limit your photography. Then determine how you will communicate your brand to clients and on social media. That's it. Easier said than done, but that's the key. Finally, you have a unique creative point of view the world deserves to see, so just go create it. I believe in you. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Yeah,
so we do have some time for some Q&A. We have 2 microphones, so let's see some hands, and we'll try to scatter them out. So I'll go first.
Hi, I'm Joseph. Nice to meet you. Congratulations on your career, of course.
Thank you.
So another year has passed by, and we are seeing what AI is doing, right? In terms of creating images. But everything you've showed today, I don't see how can be replaced with AI, right? But you are in contact with these important brands. It is a conversation that you had with them, or like hints that you got from them that they're going to use AI for certain content, but photography or videos are always going to be there.
Yeah.
That's it, very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone has a different take on this, right? But I think for me, I think that smaller companies are going to outsource AI kind of like we sometimes outsource our design to Canva, right? It's going to be for like the lower budget projects, but I think photographers that are at the top of their game, that again, you're not hiring them just for a photo, you're hiring them for the unique creative vision and the storytelling and that signature style. I think those are the people that are gonna stay working really well in this industry, right? So that's why I think everything we talked about is so important now more than ever, because it's not about just taking a good photo, AI can do that, it's about having a really unique creative vision. Yeah. Yeah.
Another question over here.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. My name is David, and I'm curious, how do you balance, like, because it seems like you go through a lot of, like, planning. How do you balance when things don't go according to plan? Like, how do you stay quick on your feet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just being willing to like work on your feet and being willing to just like start from scratch on shoot. I think that comes from a lot of experience. And honestly, a lot of times I'll do reshoots. Hopefully that never needs to happen for a client, but for a personal work, if I'm just like doing something that I think is a test and like it might not turn out well, it's really creative, I will be willing to go back and shoot it again, honestly. But otherwise, it's just like getting creative on the spot. I think that's why I really love having pretty in-depth mood boards, whereas if I feel like I get stuck trying to shoot one thing, there's 10 more things that I can try. I think just like coming up with all those ideas ahead of time is really important too. Yeah.
Kelsey, great presentation. A lot of photographers here. Yeah. You're on the front of the camera, you're behind the camera, you're staging it. I'm fascinated with how are you working all those angles at once?
Yeah.
Are you more of a model, more of a photographer? What are you?
I know, it's confusing for people, I know. So when I'm doing traditional self-portraits, I'm actually gonna talk about this at the Canon booth at 4 later today. I have a whole other presentation on travel photography and self-portraiture. I'm just using what's usually the interval timer in my camera to set up those self-portraits. But for more in-depth shoots like that car shoot, there's a lot of times where a tripod's just not gonna cut it. So I have either collaborated with friends or I hire photo assistants to travel with me so that they help communicate my vision. So I feel like my main job is being the creative director of everything and showing them how I wanna shoot it. So that's how I do a lot of my shoots these days. And then I style everything myself ahead of time, and then I do all the post-processing editing myself. Thank you.
So piggyback riding on what he's just said, you're kind of a jack of all trades, and you're able to master the model, the shooter, and you're able to see yourself in your own images. So can you take us a little bit into the glimpse of how you create the image of yourself when you're in that shot? Do you take that from your growing up, make-believe as a child, or do you have any acting experience? Where do you draw that from?
Yeah, so for me, at the beginning of the presentation I mentioned, I got signed to a modeling agency when I was 17, and I got a lot of experience on camera and understanding how to be on camera and how to move and how to pose and how even, your angles and how you look in certain light. So I got really used to being on camera, and when I switched back to photography again, I was shooting landscapes and I was shooting other models because I was like, I'm a photographer, I don't model anymore. And then I realized that when I was shooting other models, like I knew how I would do it in that image because I had that modeling background. And that's what really inspired me to get back in front of a camera in my work again, because I just had that background knowledge. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. In terms of the modeling and being unique, sometimes I think it's what's comfortable in your body and your personality. I say I have an alter ego because I think I'm kind of like goofy and awkward in real life. But when I'm in front of a camera, like something happens. I'm not a smiley person. I serve edgy, right? So just knowing that about myself, and that's how I feel comfortable, that really also kind of inspires my work and in the kind of styles that I think I can translate well on camera. Yeah. Anything else? Good.
Okay, one more time, a round of applause for Kelsey. Thank you so much.
Thank
So much good insights and everything. Thank you, thank you.